And the first is inspired and deals with the loom. Wyrd is often described as being a web of Wyrd, not of a spider's web, not as something to catch us, but as a weaving. The oldest meaning of web being something woven. And the looms of the time were dropped when the strings hung down, and then the thread was woven in and out of those strings, the warp and the weft. So this poem, that image inspires this poem, the warp-weighted loom. And as a thin, frail and twisted thread, thrown between the two-way pullings of the weave, we hope, the sword falling to pat us down in place, our passing may some pattern leave. For scattered threads is sometimes all we seem, hair unanchored, carried in a wind, caught perhaps by birds, and on a ragged beam into a one-time bed for cuckoos wrought. We cling to continuity of threads, begun in ages past and tied atop the loom by crafting gods or wiser heads, to keep us in the cloth whene'er we stop, as might perhaps the poet, warp of time, seek to imbue with weft of lasting rhyme. You have the hanging threads of warp and the twisting thread of weft going through. And mentioned in there the weaving sword. The weaver's sword is a batten of wood put in to hammer the threads down into place. That sense of things remaining, things depending on something else as we progress through time, through Wyrd. I don't think I've ever shared this poem before. It's how old now? Nearly 10 years old, and it's a very personal one, because it talks about someone that I fell in love with many years ago, loved very deeply, very strongly, and it was a short time together, and it ended sadly, and for many, many years after, there was a sense of regret that things hadn't worked out between us. It took a long time for the love. I don't think the love ever did pass. I think the love is still there, as strong as it ever was. But consequent to that separation, realizing that if it hadn't have ended, then all the love that I'd had since from elsewhere would not have occurred. And more important than that even, my son wouldn't have been born. And that's quite an important thing. And when later, due thanks to the wonders of Facebook and the other internet web, I made contact with them again and found that they'd had a daughter, that doubled up on that sense of, okay, we couldn't have that, but this was important, what came afterwards. So I wrote something quite quickly and heartfelt from that and I called it Kinderley. Children set our lives unchangeably into Wyrd. Moments of the past that might have been regretted become needful steps towards the maiming of the son, the blessing of the daughter. Dangers face down in the road are no longer former perils, but sit pleasant in the memory. The warp in the woven tapestry, the weft of necessity. Wyrd is what has turned, Verdandi what is turning. From out the cloud, the unformed ounce of carded wool, the precious thread is spun by the drop spindle's pull, weighted by all that has become and what should follow. I strive for my son, You shine for your daughter. Each has been shaped by the moments we shared, though brief. Children of our distant parting. Chains of deep regret are shattered by them, shackle us no longer. Every twist of time, of triumph or defeat, hankered after moments. High-speed blowouts at centers veering, vehicles beyond control and might have killed us, made us rather mother and father to those who easily might otherwise never have been. So necessary now. Joy must be had in sorrow, if we would enjoy sorrow's fruit. For never was a bitter sowing had no blessing in the reaping. If not in a day, then with the dawn to follow. If not for the dead, then for all who did depend upon the lives now lost, upon layers underfoot, the bedrock of fathers and forbearing mothers. What must follow is unwritten, though it falls from what is writ. Our young children's sowing is yet to seed the furrow. It may bring kinder to the fire, kindness to the world, babes of their own, or beaming friendship to adopted kin, an unknown inheritance. You gaze at your girl, I gleam upon my boy, watch the spindle turning, the spring water welling. Give thanks to the road, the route we have followed, gripping hard beneath to what has been, and is, and is, and always shall. I'd be quite glad if they got to hear me read that, if they log on to listen at some point. But we'll see. Two others. The imagery of weaving and spinning is very important within Wyrd. The Norni are often seen to be weavers, with a web of Wyrd, the tapestry being the cloth that has been woven, still visible to see, still existing, still there to be used. And also the spinning, the thread being pulled by a drop spindle. I think this one harks back a little bit to the first one of wanting to see what of us remains. And it's called Spin and Weave. I am not known until I'm gone, until the spinster snips the thread, and you will know the length of me. And you will know it's not the world, because the world will still be here, and I will not be. The turning started at my birth, the dropping spindle forming from a formless cloud, the thread I spun. And all I've did for good or ill, for love or gain, remains within the tapestry, never to be undone. The cloth continues, warp and weft, the pattern missing my motif, and as perhaps a child's deed or word of a disciple takes an echo of my own reply to those before, my own receipt. And as the cloth continues on, even for 1,000,000 years, or never ending, never to be threadbare, though you may feel the loss of me, may miss my stripe, amidst the warp and weft, amidst the planets faring, on that loom, amidst the cloth upon your back, my weaving there. I hope you find that reassuring. That when we're past, when we've gone, everything we've done remains under the feet of those who passed before, passed after us. And the last one of today's set, which I will be repeating at 5:30 and at 9, on time, I expect. And I chose this one, and this one kind of prompted today's theme because it is one that I wrote not very long ago, maybe even 4 hours ago. And the sense of its newness is something that I don't often mention when reciting. It doesn't often inspire confidence if someone says, "Oh, I wrote this on the way here." But this is, I include it because it's an illustrative of the fact of Verdandi's turning brings into the world things that weren't there before. While everything we feel has passed is still here with us, what is to come is still arriving, moment by moment. And I called it the pause. Verdandi pauses from her spinning. Though the whirl keeps turning, she looks up at what has been made. Urdr is busy binding the threads into skeins, passing them on to the weavers. Skuld is carding the wool, scowling. The tree looms up over them, blistered. Bark has been stripped, in need of covering. Mud bubbles up from the pool. In this present moment, where undefined cloud of wool on the distaff becomes singular thread, she can see all the people in the peopled age bringing stuff into being, like they were bringing it in through a door, into the world, into the middle yard. Some out of elf home, some out of dwarf home, some out of Etin home. Some from the fire, some from the ice, some from the home of the dead. And as the gods of the wild were also bringing it through, so the people brought it through. And as the God of the people were also bringing it through, so the people brought it through, all becoming self, life, life, self, all becoming, not knowing where it was all coming from. Urdr is collecting the threads into skeins, all the wisdom of the scene completed. Skuld is reloading the distaff, scowling, whispering, all will become as it should. The whirl still spinning, Verdandi returns to her work, the cloud of wool turning to singular thread in her hand.